Joining us, Congressman Adam Schiff of California, a member of the House Select Committee on January 6th and the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it's been a huge week of public revelations. I'm not sure how much of this is new information to you or the committee, but if we could start with Ginni Thomas, and if you could just characterize how interested you are in speaking to her and if there are plans to do so.
Well, there's several stunning things to me about what is publicly known and been revealed about Ginni Thomas. Here she is weighing in with state legislators in Arizona, seeking to get them to essentially send a bogus slate of electors that didn't represent who won the popular election in Arizona. And, you know, the judge in California, Judge Carter, in the case involving Eastman, this lawyer, describes what the former president was involved in as a criminal conspiracy. That was a conspiracy to interfere with the joint session, to defraud people. And here you have the wife of a Supreme Court justice engaged in a parallel effort to get Arizona to improperly cast aside the votes of millions. And also to add to it, her husband on the Supreme Court writing a dissent in a case arguing against providing records to Congress that might have revealed some of these same emails. That conflict of interest just screams at you. So it's a tangled web here, but it is a pernicious tangled web at that.
Congressman, had you seen the emails that Ginni Thomas sent that the Post reports on today? Have they been swept up in any of the prongs of your probe?
You know, I can't comment on whether the Select Committee has them or had them already. We have a mountain of materials, and I can also tell you I haven't seen all of the materials that we've been able to accumulate. But you know, we continue to learn more and more in this Eastman case, for example, and this was the subject of a FOIA request, so I can comment on it. There are records showing that Eastman was basically giving a blueprint to a Pennsylvania lawmaker about how to fudge the results, how to defraud the people of Pennsylvania. I mean, the explicit nature of that corrupt activity is so blatant. And now it's revealed that he's in direct conversation with Donald Trump, strategizing with Donald Trump. So that criminal conspiracy that Judge Carter mentioned, now courtesy of Mr. Eastman, goes straight back to the president.
Well, so you've said two things that I want to press you on. One, what has been described as likely felonies committed by Donald Trump and John Eastman seems to track with all of the reporting about where where the Select Committee's work is now focused. And there's been some reporting that Congresswoman Liz Cheney and her public and private work is certainly focused on making sure that the ex-president's role in all this is revealed in part in the public hearings. I wonder if you can comment on how much of this final phase, and I don't know if you would feel or describe it as final, but the final phase before the public hearings is focused on Donald Trump's role in that conspiracy.
Well, you know, in my point of view, I won't speak for Liz, but in my point of view, he's the author and the architect of this plan to overturn the election, of this coup attempt, you know, masquerading as a legal strategy. After all, he's the chief promulgator of the big lie. And that big lie is used around the country to try to get states to send bogus slates of electors, fake certificates of electors. He's involved in this. He's calling state legislators. He's calling local elections officials. He is strategizing with Eastman and others. So, you know, he's the instigator of, the author of, the architect of, you know, this effort to overturn our election, culminating in this violence on January 6th. So you can't ignore the principal player here. And, you know, there are a lot of other players, too. Our goal is to expose the role of all who are involved, the fragility of our democracy. But the reason it was so fragile, the main reason it remains so fragile is because of the active participation of the head of today's Republican Party, Donald Trump.
I mean, your response seems to render moot the debate from about 3-4 weeks ago about whether or not the committee would refer Donald Trump. It sounds like whether you make the referral or not, your committee is in possession of ample evidence to allege that he's the chief architect of a coup.
Well, look, the judge out in California, on the limited basis of the material he's reviewing, just involving Eastman, has reached that conclusion. We have access to. Well, I certainly concur with Judge Carter's observation. I think he was involved in an effort to overturn the election. I think that there is evidence, as the judge pointed out, of the president's involvement in multiple potentially criminal acts. The judge there doesn't even get into what Donald Trump did in Georgia, trying to get the Secretary of State to find exactly the number of votes he would need to defeat his opponent, and even threatening or intimating prosecution if he didn't. Those are potentially criminal acts that ought to be investigated by the Justice Department.
Congressman, you talked about the states, and I just want to press on the significance of Ginni Thomas, the wife of a Supreme Court justice. As you said, her husband, perhaps this falls in the category of wild, epic, 100-year coincidences. He is the one Supreme Court justice who dissented on how much information your bipartisan committee should have access to. Do you want to understand Ginni Thomas's role in the fake electors plot, as it is now also under scrutiny and investigation by DOJ?
Yes. I mean, I want to understand the role of anyone in overturning our election. And it will be up to the committee as a committee, how we go forward in terms of Ginni Thomas. We have other sources of information about her role and the role of others that don't necessarily have to come from her. But yes, where you have prominent people involved in essentially an effort to overturn our election, to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power. A big part of the reason why people are listening to Ginni Thomas in these state legislatures or elsewhere is because of, not just her own work, but of course, who her husband is. Right. It's unless it's a 100-year coincidence, as you point out. And of course, the justice's own role in trying to deprive the committee of information is just scandalous.
And it certainly tracks with something the Chief Justice has talked about, and that's the perception of the integrity of the court. I want to ask you about the headlines that were made almost 24 hours ago. This letter for a voluntary interview with a Republican congressman that we haven't talked too much about, and we don't know that much about. I just want to read an excerpt from the letter. You write to Mr. Loudermilk, quote, based on our review of evidence in the Select Committee's possession, we believe you have information regarding a tour you led through parts of the Capitol complex on January 5th, 2021. Republicans on the Committee on House Administration, of which you were a member, claim to have reviewed security footage from the days preceding January 6th and determined, quote, there were no tours, no large groups, no one with MAGA hats on. However, the Select Committee's review of evidence directly contradicts that denial. We understand that to mean that you have evidence that says the opposite of, quote, there were no tours, no large groups, and no one with MAGA hats on January 5th. Do you have evidence of reconnaissance tours on January 5th?
We have evidence that contradicts what Mr. Loudermilk and other Republicans on that committee said, which is that there were no tours that day before January 6th. And we would like him to come in and testify and share what he knows and explain why he would be a signatory to that letter or whether, for some reason, our evidence is wrong. But we do have evidence that contradicts that claim, that merits his coming in and sharing with us what he knows.
In response, he called for the Capitol Police to release the footage that he relied upon for that denial. Is it a fair assumption to say that you're in possession of evidence that goes beyond the footage he's referring to exonerate him?
I'm confident that if he comes in and testifies, we will give him an opportunity to explain any evidence that seems to contradict the claims that he has made. So we look forward to what we hope will be his cooperation with our committee. We have had other investigations in the past, some of which I've conducted, where Democrats and Republicans have come in and cooperated voluntarily. But he clearly, in our view, has evidence relevant to our investigation and relevant to that very issue of whether tours were conducted on January 5th or prior to the events of the 6th.
It's just a stunning question to leave open. And Harry Litman, former DOJ official, said on this program that if, depending on how this witness and this piece of evidence that contradicts his claim turns out, if this is someone who provided tours to someone who carried out acts of violence on the U.S. Capitol on the 6th, he made the parallel to someone sharing cockpit footage with attackers on September 11th. I mean, are your questions that serious in nature about his role?
You know, I don't want to overstate or understate what we're trying to find out from Mr. Loudermilk. And so, but we do have evidence that contradicts what he has represented. We would like to talk with him. We think he has information he can share with us. And at this point, I'm not at liberty to say how significant or not significant it may be, but clearly all of our committee members are concerned that the statements coming from him and other committee members don't hold up to the evidence, and we want to know why.
What can you tell us about, not necessarily today, but what the process might look like in the future with Justice Department, Criminal Division, prosecutors wanting access to your transcripts and your work product?
You know, this is not an uncommon phenomenon. There were cases in the Russian investigation, the Ukraine investigation, where Justice Department wanted information that we had obtained, and of course information we wanted that they'd obtained. And it's the product of a negotiation. We want to support the Justice Department in their work. I don't think anyone has been louder than I have in calling for the Justice Department to pursue all leads of any criminal activity related to overturning the election. But, you know, we received a very blanket request for information. The Congress doesn't simply say, hey, Justice Department, come on in and we'll open our files. You know, they need to be specific about what they're looking for, that we can help them with. And we're, I think, more than willing to do that, eager to help in any way we can. But we do have an institutional interest in not simply setting precedent where the Justice Department can come rummage through a committee's investigatory files. There's also information we want from the Justice Department. And we also don't want the Justice Department to in any way discourage witnesses from talking to us that may be talking to them at the same time. So we want to discuss all these issues, want to be helpful, and I'm confident we'll work it out.
What do you think when a Republican primary night comes and goes and the energy and the support from Republican voters is around and does not disqualify people who were champions of the Stop the Steal movement, which is, you know, your investigation makes clear it is part of this broader conspiracy to overturn the results of a free and fair election?
You know, it's terrifying. I mean, here we are. We're more than a year after this violent attack on the Capitol, and our democracy is weaker and more vulnerable than ever.
Yeah.
And a big part of the reason is you have people who were lying about the last election, who continue to lie about the last election, and they're running for Secretary of State. They're running to be the people counting the ballots next time. They've already proved their fundamental incapacity to do those jobs, and yet they're on the ballot and they could win. And if they should win and there's a contested result next time, no one will have confidence in what they say because they've already proven themselves untrustworthy. And this is how democracies wither. It's by using instruments of democracy to tear itself down. So it's terrifying. And we all need to wake up to this threat. The threat on our elections infrastructure, the threat on those who conduct the elections, the local technocratic elections officials, some being driven out of town with death threats. This is the paramount danger to our democracy right now, along with voter disenfranchisement laws aimed at people of color.
And the common link there is those disenfranchisement laws are funneled and fueled by lies about voter integrity. They're pushed in states where they had no fraud. I just want to ask you a final question about when you hear Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy on tape, and these two great reporters from the New York Times have lots and lots of tapes, sounding a lot like you and me, right? Describing Trump as a son of a bitch who he hopes Democrats take care of. That's Mitch McConnell's quote on one of those tapes. And Kevin McCarthy making abundantly clear that after January 6th, Donald Trump had to go, and detailing on a conference call with his members that he wouldn't resign, but either impeachment or the 25th Amendment, which his only concern with was that it was too slow. When you see the private thoughts of Republicans put back in the tube or covered over or consumed by their public conduct of enabling him and strengthening him, and as you said, strengthening Republicans around the country who adhere to this big lie, what do you think the prospects are for success, or what is your benchmark of success for the public phase of the 1-6 Select Committee hearings?
Our benchmark for success, I think, is to tell the story of what happened in the run-up to the 6th and on the 6th in a compelling way. To give good information to those in the public, the tens of millions of Americans who still have an open mind, who generally want to understand what happened and how close we came to losing our democracy. But you're absolutely right. Listening to those tapes of McConnell and McCarthy in private, expressing what we all felt about the unfitness of the former president, and to see now how they have completely caved in to the immorality of the former president, it just takes your breath away. What is scandalous about Kevin McCarthy, for example, lying to the New York Times about those conversations in the wake of January 6th, isn't that he's lying today to the New York Times. That's not the scandal. Anyone who knows McCarthy isn't particularly surprised by that. The scandal is that if he didn't lie, if he doesn't lie, if he doesn't continue lying, he can't serve in Republican leadership.
Right.
That's the terrible scandal, the terrible tragedy. Robert Caro, the historian, once said in an interview that power doesn't corrupt as much as it reveals. It doesn't always reveal us for our best, but it says a lot about who we are. Well, power has said a lot about who Kevin McCarthy is and who Mitch McConnell is. And if we don't elect people of character, then none of it works, no matter how brilliant the Constitution is, no matter how we reform the Electoral Count Act. If people don't give meaning to their oath of office, none of it works at the end of the day.
It sounds like the other half of your answer is that the stakes are very, very high for the public phase.
They're very high.
Very high. Thank you for spending some time to talk to us about these stunning developments today. We're really grateful for your time.
Thank you.